Hey everyone. So I wanted to talk about something that went on last night and this morning. I just came off a 36-day spell with my ancestors, and it's the bridge spell. And this spell, I'll go into more detail later, but basically it was building both a spiritual bond and bridge between me and them. And I'm talking about my Ozark women, my Ozark grandmothers, but also a physical bond in sense of place. So place here and place there. And I'll go through each of the parts when I do the bridge spell video, which will be soon. But during this time, and for quite a while before then, my practice has changed, especially when it comes to my deity, the Morrigan and Kari. And it went from a place of devotion to a place of working to a place of incorporation. And when I mean incorporation, was too often, especially in the beginning. And it's a good thing in the beginning, I think, because it helps us develop and build that bond and strengthen those ties together. But we do a lot of concentrated work, which means, we light candles for them. We say prayers to them every day. We do devotionals every day. And so we are taking specific time in a ritualistic manner to communicate and talk with them. And as I said, in the beginning, I think this is great, especially when you're bonding with a spirit or deity, for the simple fact that you need a place to start. You need a place of bond, of community, unity. And through that, it builds. And when the bond is there and it's been strengthened and it's a strong bond, then we move from a place of action and devotional in that way to a place of incorporation. And incorporation is, they're just with you all the time in your day to day. You don't have to light a candle. You don't have to, block everything else out and take time to communicate with them. You're just talking to them throughout the day. You do it with your morning, me is tea. Everybody else seems to be in coffee. But we do it when we're just out, or we see something that reminds us of them, or something happens and we're like, what is going on? And we start communicating with them differently. We start hearing them differently, and then they become just a part of our daily. And so with all that being said, that's how my practice with my deity evolved. That's how my practice with spirit evolves, is we spend all this time in a bonding, but once it's built, it becomes a place of living. And just living with them in our day-to-day. So last night, since I've spent 36 straight days really focused with my Ozark women, my ancestors, I didn't take a lot of time for communication with my deity during that time. The Morrigan and Kari knew what I was doing. They were all for it. They were standing, I want to say guard, but, my protection during it. They were not out of my thoughts. It was still the same daily living aspects, I talking to them and recognizing them in my day-to-day. But I didn't take any specific time just to communicate with each one of them. And so last night, I got the time to do that. And so I sat there and I was, I talked with the Morrigan a bit, to see where we were, what we needed to play with next. And, were there any things that needed to be adjusted, that kind of stuff. And then I went and I talked to Kari. And Kari is different because my relationship with him is very different. The Morrigan is very much my foundation, and Kari is very much my outer interaction voice, because he is a god of wind and he is a god of voice. He's a god of leadership and communication. And so the relationship is a little different, and my role in work with him is very different than from the Morrigan. And so when I was talking with Kari, I got this distinct feeling that, something was wrong. There was a disconnect somewhere there, and that's what I felt. And I went to a knee-jerk reaction. And this morning I'm really irritated about it, but my knee-jerk reaction was, oh, there is a disconnect, there's something off. Thus, I need to adjust things and go back to a daily practice. And, we need to light candles, we need to do prayers, we need to do, set specific time aside during every single day to, make sure that we're doing just one-on-one individual conversation with nobody else and that kind of thing. But that's not my foundation anymore. That's not my practice anymore. It's not where I am. I'm in that day to day. I'm in the living in my practice, living in my spirituality, living in those bonds and connections. But that was my knee-jerk reaction. And so I was sitting on the couch and I was, like, okay, so first of all, maybe we need to redo his altar shrine space, because it's kind of small and it doesn't got a lot of things on it, but he's not a very flashy and needy kind of a energy, spirit, God. And so I was sitting there and I was thinking about how to rework it and stuff. And then my son Crichton came in. And he sat down next to me. He's been really interested in witchcraft and what I'm doing and spiritualism, and especially when it is geared towards earth and animals. And so he came down, he sat next to me, and he asked me what I was doing, and I told him my problem. That Kari doesn't seem to be very happy, and so I'm going to rework his altar, and we're going to, think back to, other old practices and stuff. And I said, I'm starting with the altar. And so he was like, well, okay, tell me more about him. And so I told him about Kari, and I was telling him about his aspects and what he's over, the voice aspect, and that's written voice, spoken voice, sung voice, music, writing, those kinds of things. And my son has been really big into writing, and he's been making up all these really cool little stories that he's making up. And then he's also into cryptids. And so he's looking at, developing his own cryptids and things of that nature. And so he was like, okay, well, what's the deer skull for? And so I had to explain the reindeer and deer in general. And that's, one of Kari's big main symbols is the deer and the owl. And so when Crichton came back and he was like, well, okay, so if he's voice and he's writing and he's this artistic, then we need more artistic things. And he was like, okay, so let's take the recent owl feather and put it into like an inkwell, so it looks like a writing utensil. It's a quill. And I was like, oh, that's a neat idea. Don't have an inkwell. So we grabbed one of the little itty bitty tiny jars and we cleaned it real well and we put some sand in it and then we stuck the feather in it. And, he was like, oh, well, we should, move the owl onto there. So we moved the owl onto there, our owl statue. And there are other things that we want to do and build out. And I think really I need to adjust my shelves, move my nature shelf, because all of my altars and shrines are on shelves. So I need to move that one and then give Kari his own shelf. That way it's not him and the Morrigan sharing the same. They each have their own shelf and more things can be added. And it was that whole process of talking with Crichton and going through, giving him information about him. And he started really connecting with Kari and was like, oh, he's kind of neat. I want to learn more. So we'll get into that later with him. But it brought me back to maybe the disconnect wasn't so much about time and all that, because I don't think they care. I don't think time is anything for them like it is for us. And my deity has never cared about that kind of stuff, as far as, jealousy in the way we think of jealousy and demanding in the way we think of demanding. And they demand a lot of things of me, but it's all about my personal growth and my personal journey. I'm moving forward. And granted, there are certain messages and things they want done too. But the primary of it is really centered on my own personal growth. And so I ended up drawing cards this morning. First, I did it for the energy of today, and Oracle was front and center. And Oracle work is, I've done it for a long time, but through this bridge spell has completely started changing, transforming, advancing, honing the skills and gaining. It really was about gaining different Oracle type skills. And so it was interesting that Oracle came up. And then again, I went and I did another draw just for myself. And Oracle was front and center again. Oracle. Because that is what I'm working through, what I've been working through with the bridge spell, was a whole different type of Oracle work and advancing those skills in a different area. And the interesting thing was it gave me two sides. So over here, we've got ham fasting and Pegasus, which is unity and freedom. And so to me, it was really speaking about that knee-jerk reaction issue. Because I can't go back and do things that don't feel right just because I feel it's the order of things, or, it's not even a feeling, it's a thought. The thought that, oh, this is step, 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 step. This isn't something to think my way through. It's something that I need to feel my way through. And unity doesn't mean giving up my freedom. And freedom doesn't mean that I can't have unity. I need to have a balance of both. I need to have my freedom and do my craft, my day-to-day, my work, keeping my living. I don't need to change that. What I do need to do is, consider more of that unity piece where they're not all separate little pieces. They're kind of all together. And they're small patterns all living within a large pattern. And that large pattern is my personal guides. It's the deity and spirits that are in my inner circle. That's a good way of putting it. And on the other side was growth in B. And so growth for me, especially in this, felt very personal. My personal growth, my personal movement forward on my path. And B is very much about the larger group, the community, the And this is because we're dealing with oracle work, and this is, the issue. The community is my community of spirits. It's the Morrigan, it's Kari, it's ancestors, it's land spirit. And again, knowing that my personal growth is one side and they are another side, and both need separate things, but we're on it's all the same path. They're separate and they're not separate all at the same time. So thinking about them, I can think about them in separate ways, but living and feeling through them, it's one. Because it's my life. It's my journey. It's my path. I don't have all these, separate little paths dependent on who I'm working with and all that. It really is a joint of all together. And so, yeah, I know this is kind of rambly because it's really all I'm doing. I'm just chatting about my experience and stuff. But the thing about the knee-jerk reaction is I had this knee-jerk reaction to revert back, and that was all thought. Feeling my way through it is what I'm doing now. Living in my spirituality, living in my craft, these aren't separate things anymore. They're not separate parts of my life. And thus, my deities, my ancestors, these aren't separate. They all work together. They all blend together. And yes, they have their separateness too. But in my living, we're all living in this space on my path, in my experience as we go through. So when you've had a major change in your practice, and we're talking about in the way that we go about it, our not so much our foundation, but what we built. When we have a major change, in mind-wise, going from, thinking, consciously, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this for each one of them, and going from a feeling through a emotional living space. So it's not so much splitting and dividing them into times and brackets and all this, but just living life with them all the time, 24/7. That was my change. That's what I moved through. And so it really kind of brings up that thought of, thinking your way through a situation and feeling your way through a situation. Because my knee-jerk reaction was thinking my way through the situation. So wrong. I didn't need to think about this. I needed to feel my way through. That's part of Oracle. It's feeling our way through. Having faith. Keeping our authority. It really goes into this morning's Twisted Shadow too. So, yeah. So fuck that. I am not going to go back to things that don't fit in my practice just because my mind is like, this is the logical course of action. No, nope. I am going to live in it. And I need to make some adjustments there. I know that. So that's what I'm going to be figuring out. How all of this applies now and how to live in all of it. And feel my way through situations and stop being so driven by thought. It doesn't mean I don't think. It doesn't mean that I don't. But I have all this. I have all this wisdom. I've done tons of research, tons of studying, tons of living experience. So I need to feel through things now. We're past a point of, always needing to think and gather more information and all this through a situation. I need to be more feeling through the situations. Hopefully that makes sense to you. If not, you're just not there yet either. Okay. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean you're not at the space that I am in order to, that's terrible. It just means that you're just not in the space that I'm in right now, as far as with all the experience and with the wisdom that I've gained over my lifetime. And that's okay. It's not a bad thing. It's just a thing. I probably lost you there. Okay, it doesn't matter. So this was just a little bit about what I'm going through right now. It's what I'm thinking about this morning. It's what I went through yesterday. I wanted to kind of share the knee-jerk reaction idea just because there's a lot of times when we revert to that because it's safe. It's because, we think that this is, the way because it worked before. But we're not the same people we were before. That's a better way of saying it. We're not the same people we were before. Thus, our practice is not the same. Thus, the things that we are going to do are not the same. All right, I've kept you long enough. Have a great day.